Okay, we're live. Remember, everything you sing is being recorded and going out. So, I want to continue with culture, and also, but start off with. So, we'll start out with explaining what the biopsychosocial recon is. Take a beginning look at cultural competency and cultural proficiency, and finish off with intersectionality and crash if we can get to that. But it's okay if we don't get to it today, we'll get to it later. Rasmussen doesn't have this, so I use textbooks as a starting point because one of the things that happens is one of your classmates pointed out when he was talking with somebody who's else in the field, and they said, you know, that this class is hard. And I said, well, it's not that. The class is hard. This is hard stuff. We're dealing with people's life and death issues. And for a lot of people, it's kind of like they had, for me, I didn't really have training in this. I had to learn it the way the cat learned to swim. Now, I don't know if you tortured animals, like your sister's cat or your brother tortured your cat, but we had a swimming pool, and, you know, I remember when my kid sister, you know, we were drawing a bath for her, and she had turned on only the hot and dropped the cat in there. Not intentionally, right? Good thing that she didn't go in there first herself, right? And there's that yowl, right? And cats actually do know how to swim. They don't like it, especially if it's hot, right? You know, throwing a cat into the swimming pool, they don't necessarily drown. They can swim just like a dog paddle. I mean, that's what they look like. But there are cats, top predators, that swim, that like to. So a lot of people who, for example, when I've given this class before, when we talk about some of the issues within this particular acronym, like the last one, heterosexism. Well, why are you talking about that? You're just being politically correct. No, it's not about political correctness. We're the medical profession. We do not deny adequate care to anyone for any reason. Period. End of discussion. If you have trouble with that, you shouldn't be in the field. Okay? So, you know, there might be a difference between, you know, what you hear from your pastor at church, but we're part of the medical profession. So you got to deal with that. Yeah.
Why do people get turned down for the organ health
Huh. I mean, okay, so as an example, right? Here's what the Affordable Care Act really should be. If you're a citizen, you're covered. You have the same medical coverage as Congress. If you can afford to pay for it, great. If you're homeless, we'll cover you because we're Americans and that's what it's about. End of discussion. But it ain't that. Right? So in Oregon, right, a state with less than 4 million people, so it's smaller than my hometown. They have to limit stuff. At least they actually had, okay, we're going to try and cover people that aren't insured because you had a governor that was an emergency room physician who noticed that people are using the emergency room as their primary care, and that ain't working. It's more expensive. We need to do something else. But they ain't got the money to cover everybody. They don't. Right? tell you about level 7 kids. Have you heard the phrase? This is what blew my mind, that they actually had a phrase for this. You know, let's see, what are we calling them now? DHS, used to be CSD, Child Protective Services, you know, whatever, right? So they deal with child abuse. We're not so much now, but, you know, meth was a big problem. So we knew that 75% of the child abuse cases were basically due to meth and other drugs. Kids were getting abused by whoever, right? Well, here's the problem. A level 7 kid, they try to intervene. You're supposed to, as a mandatory reporter, you're supposed to call in anything. But the reality is that they're only going to intervene if the kid's below 10. If the kid's a teenager, they ain't going to do nothing. And that's who they refer to as level 7. Wait. You acknowledge you ain't going to do nothing. It's against the law. These kids are being traumatized, sexually abused, and you officially aren't going to do anything because you ain't got the money. Wow. And I'm supposed to support this system. And I'm supposed to be a mandatory reporter to a system that does that. Right? So why do people get turned down for OHP? Complex case by case, but you know, the bottom line is, one, we ain't got no money or enough money to cover folks. I mean, that's the usual reason given, right? So am I on a soapbox or am I talking about reality? You still have to basically deal with those people that are in front of you that have been neglected by the system.
I got put on the bridge program through Riverbend.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I was becoming approved for the Oregon Health Plan.
Okay.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Well,
they sent me package after package, month after month. I was going to write them a letter and say, you know, stop chopping down these damn trees if you're not going to approve me.
yeah. All right. So, biopsychosocial recon. Let me break it down. This particular assignment. So in your book on page 37, which if you look at that paragraph, I mean, it does kind of tell you how to do it if you can decode it. But I'm going to tell you that this is like the industry standard belief system. So I'm going to break it down so it works for you practically, right? Because if you read that, what it talks about on 37, so the assignment is you basically create a person, or you can talk about a person that you know about already if you're working within treatment. So your observations of how addictions are reinforced throughout society, and also your particular solutions, either that individual or to a particular problem. But I'll run through the biopsycho. So let's do the close of week 6, which is when the midterm goes out. All right, so here's a partial example. So I created an agency, First Initiate Recovery Enterprises. FIRE. So in the biopsychosocial, so there's what's going on biological, what's going on psychological, which will include their emotions. Social network, like what's going on to produce them. Biopsychosocial. And then you're scanning all that and putting it together like it's a story. So bio, their name, their age, how they identify racially. Not everybody who looks white is white. Not everybody who looks Hispanic is Hispanic. You know, there's certain clues in their name. You figure those kind of things out. Male, how they identify, you know, are they heterosexual? Male, female identified, are they bisexual, gay, lesbian, trans, intersexed, two-spirit, who is an addict, alcoholic, or chronic debtor. They are Hep C positive with a viral load of 200,000, particles, which is a low value for hep C. He identifies his history, HX, of IDU, injectable drug use, as a probable source of hep C. Now, in our field, it doesn't really matter how they got infected, but it's good to know. Because even if it's an awareness piece for them, like, so for example, I'll call this client Greg. So, Greg, no, he wasn't heterosexual. He wasn't sure of his sexuality. 24-year-old logger from logger family in Pendleton. Okay, coming here, HIV positive, wasn't sure if he got positive with his years as a chicken in San Francisco and New York and LA, chicken, male, teenage male prostitute. In case you didn't know that, okay? Learn about the sex industry, right? Lots of people, how do they pay for their habits? They sell their bodies. They sell their body to whoever will buy, right? The fact that there is a sex industry, right? You should be hip to that. People get strung out. We run into all kinds of folks. Don't trip out about it, even though don't try not to look shocked. Okay, just take it in. Show your horror later to your clinical supervisor, okay? But you get used to it. Because, listen, this business, we get paid to listen to people's horrific stories and help them find a solution. That's what makes the class hard. Yes?
Can you go back to that last slide for a little bit?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, under the influence of coffee, I go fast. This one or the one before?
The one before.
Yeah, this is in the syllabus too, but. Can I borrow this as a prop? All right, so 37.
Do you have any past student papers that we can use as examples to read?
I could do that. I'd have to basically delete the name.
Oh, yeah. W.
Yeah.
Nice.
Let's see. Rather than viewing addiction from a single perspective, many addiction practitioners employ a biopsychosocial model to understand the etiology. Etiology means how something begins. Expression, how it develops, how it shows up. Treatment and prevention of addiction, particularly relapse. They see addiction as a synthesis of biological, psychological, and sociocultural variables. Biopsychosocial perspective includes and integrates aspects of current biological, psychological, and sociocultural theories. A biopsychosocial model is consonant with a holistic view of the client. Then it also talks about, for example, a public health agent-host environmental model. Who is unfamiliar with that?
What did you say?
The public health environmental model. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay. Let's talk about that. Since nobody's in Cottage Grove, I don't have to use the electronic billboard. So, the U.S. Public Health Service. The head of the U.S. Public Health Service is the Surgeon General of the United States. He's like the doctor for the country, right? The Surgeon General is technically a Rear Admiral in the Navy. Whether or not he's in the Navy or not, the position is considered part of the Navy. The reason is because one of our first adventures into public health was preventing scurvy among sailors. On long sea voyages, people developed vitamin deficiencies, and they start losing their teeth. Scurvy. Scurvy is a simple vitamin C deficiency. So, Public Health Service, let's pack oranges on sea voyages and have them eat oranges and prevent scurvy. Right? Okay, so the environmental model is a triangle. So inside of public health, it's called the environmental model. Outside of public health, it's called the public health model. But here's how it works. You have a triangle. So this is disease prevention. You have the host, agent, and environment. It's like a triangle, all right? So here's how that works. Let's say the disease is malaria. I went to Africa, had to take daily malarial pills, had injections, because malaria can kill you. And malaria was a major problem in the U.S. South up until about a little over 50 years ago. People died from malaria in the South. Now they die from malaria in, places like Africa, but, again, we have medicines for all that kind of stuff. So, the host is the potential target for the disease. The agent, so that's the human being, if it's malaria. The agent is the mosquito, and the environment is the swamp where the mosquitoes breed. Okay? So depending on how you want to deal with the problem, you can drain the swamp. Mosquitoes have no place to breed. You can spray the swamp. Make sure people don't have, open standing water for mosquitoes to breed in. Or you can strengthen the host. So the strategy is strengthen the host, stop the agent, change the environment. Now that's for malaria. What about substance abuse prevention or treatment? The agent is either the addict, or if you want to do prevention, it's the addict's family, primarily kids. The agent could be the liquor store or the drug dealer. The environment is the community in which this all happens. So if you're, for example, a policy wonk, you have certain laws, policies, and procedures that make up the policy environment. You can focus on, so if it's illegal drugs, the cops do suppression. They interdict the agent, or they stop drugs from coming into the country, or they bust drug dealers, or whatever. The host, they give treatment or prevention services to. So in terms of looking at, so that's what they're talking about in terms of the public health model, because that now puts it squarely in saying this is a disease, we can prevent it. So we give the host or potential host, because we want to stop it before it begins. And if it has begun, we want to make it go to a lower level, or if addiction is firmly taken hold, we want to also be able to stop it where it is and drop it back to a lower level of use or non-use. Now, before we started having this focus in the addictions field before 56, the major mainstream response, and I'm using a racial code word, mainstream means white people in America. There is a reason why we speak English here and not Nahuatl or Kalapuya or Chinook jargon or Kiswahili or Spanish or whatever. In Europe, they got no problem with speaking 3 or 4 languages. It's considered normal behavior to know multiple languages. Before 1492, there were thousands of languages here. In Africa, they speak 2,000 languages today. People don't trip. We do here, right? So there was a generic approach, mainstream generic, based on a white American cultural model back then. So what happens when, in less than 50 years, whites are no longer the majority? Okay, culture will change. Now, I'm from a place, LA, where it's kind of expected that I speak Spanish. I learned French in high school. Picked up a few other languages on the way. Not fluent, but the idea is, also when you're speaking with drug addicts, they have different slang for different things depending on where they are. It's like learning a new language. It's a whole culture, right? So I didn't get it. I wasn't taught any of this stuff. They didn't even think about this, right? So prevention, even though this is the big kind of generic model that got imposed on 12-step culture in treatment, because we say, okay, look, we can't do the 90 meetings in 90 days thing. We got to do something, we can't blame the relapse on the client, right? Because when cancer comes back and you cut it out and you cure it, you don't blame the relapse of cancer on the patient. This is a medical condition, we can't do that. We have to look at what we can control as professionals, right? So in this biopsychosocial model, then, it's starting out with the idea, so I'll go to the next slide. So you start with identifying the client, not only identifying them, but how they identify themselves. And you got to pay close attention to that. Because somebody asked me today, well, why do they call themselves people of color? I said, okay, good question. So we're speaking English. So like he said, how is that different than colored people? I said, okay, we're talking about America, not South Africa. Right? But they come from a similar culture and have a similar view, and basically, all right. So in South Africa, a colored person could be any non-white person, including a mixed-race biracial person, which, by the way, was illegal. So there was a comic on Showtime, Trevor Noah. First stand-up comic to get known outside of South Africa, and stand-up comedy in South Africa is only 11 years old. It's illegal to make jokes about the government. They throw you in jail. His mom was black, his dad was Swiss. It was illegal for them to be married in South Africa. They couldn't even walk down the street together. Dad had to walk across the street and they had to pretend they didn't know each other while he was growing up. He was a colored person because clearly he was mixed with something and not, all right? So that's South Africa. I only mention that because we have South Africans here, working here, right? So they talk about that experience. Here, colored people meant black people. That was a polite term because they would just call them nigger. And then when we decided to call ourselves Negro, then you would have a combination of Negra or you colored people. Right? So if you visit my office, you'll see a little sign from those days in the South, colored waiting room. Okay? Because waiting rooms, drinking fountains, church bathrooms, church outhouses were segregated. Schools, all that stuff. Right? So, why do you call yourselves people of color? Well, we're just taking the word colored people, and we're saying people of color, and we're basically saying that's anybody that's non-white. Now, it's not like white people are all the same either. But in American English, we have no way of conveying that other than, well, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm Dutch, I'm that. Okay? So, start with how the client identifies, right? They are however old they are, self-identified Federal 5, white, Black, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, American Indian, or Alaska Native, Federal 5. You know, you check the box when you applied here, right? However they identified, or other identification such as their native nation, tribal, or other indigenous national membership, if they know that. Client came in today, he said, I'm Grand Ronde. Well, okay, that's a confederation. So which tribe under Grand Ronde are you? Well, I don't know. It was my dad. All right. Grand Ronde. Or Diné, or Apache, or whatever. I'm a Choctaw. See, my cheekbones. Gender identification. Okay, so then you'll say their gentrification, whether they're male, female, or intersexed, etc., etc. I didn't explain intersexed yet, have I? Okay, here's the science. Okay, intersex goes like this. It's a continuum. That's a range. Okay? This is where heterosexism comes in. Heterosexism is basically saying, okay, I'm heterosexual. I've only had sex with women, right? That's considered normal. So you should be aware of any position that defines who you are as normal, because not everybody like you. They're not, right? So let's say normal is in quotes here. I'm not saying it is, but I'm noticing that people think it is. Normal in our field, in the science, is what happens predictably and reliably, whether you like it or not. Okay? So this is the science, right? So, normal. So, one set of visible, functional genitalia. You know, you stand or sit to pee. And then what happens? Intersexed. Up to 2 functional, visible sets of genitalia on one person. And then everything in between. Okay? So, for example, Jamie Lee Curtis is an intersex person. She looks female.
An actress?
The actress, yes. I'm not kidding.
I read a statistic that said there's just as many hermaphrodites born as there are redheads.
Indeed. So now we call them hermaphrodites, but they can't necessarily get themselves pregnant. Not like slugs. We're humans. Okay? But yeah, hermaphrodite is another term, right? So 2 visible, fully functioning sets of external genitalia.
So what's Jamie Curtis?
She has breasts, right? She can have a love scene with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but again,
But she has a male.
I don't know. I ain't tripping.
Don't most people get
Well, you
surgery?
got
I'm just
serious
saying,
now.
no, I'm not, I'm just saying, right, so when we have people who identify as, for example, trans, and they're trying to have sex reassignment surgery, and they feel like psychologically they're in their own body. So, for example, remember that thing that I was doing the other day about X, X, and X, Y,
Oh, the broken leg.
the broken leg thing? So, what if you have a double X or a double Y chromosome, and externally you look male or female or whatever? How do you deal with that? Well, I'll tell you, because why this, as many hermaphrodites, if you want to use that term, I don't, I use intersex person.
Is it derogatory?
Yeah.
Well, again, you ask them, it's more neutral because a hermaphrodite biologically can fertilize themselves. Humans can't get themselves pregnant. So not true, intersex is the anthropological term. All right? So part of the piece here is you have people then feel, well, I'm born in the wrong body. And particularly so consider how many folks there are that are born like this. It's, let's say, 4% of human births, which if you basically do the numbers for today, that's like 4 million people a year on the planet. Today. Now.
Or intersex.
Yeah. 4 million human births
Today.
a year. Every year for the last 250,000 years. You feeling me now? Unless you're thinking the devil controls the DNA code. This is what's happening. Predictably and reliably, it is the science. Now, in Africa, there are 12 kinds of marriage. Well, a white anthropologist wrote a book and said that in the 1970s, so of course I believe it, because I believe everything white anthropologists say. All right? Native Americans, the Osage, had 7 genders, 2 of which we'd recognize as heterosexual. And they, in 117 native languages, there's a word for a third gender. Translated in English, two-spirit. So this idea about human sexual diversity, cultures older than America basically, okay, well, these folks are sacred because they're rare. And we have a role for them in our society. Integrated, both in Africa and Native America, as well as indigenous Europeans pre-Christian. So I'm just saying, whatever your beliefs on Sunday, the science is saying this. So I can't accept, okay, fine. Keep that to yourself, because when you have one of them in front of you, you best to do what is therapeutic. If I have to be culturally competent with skinheads, you can basically deal with gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, intersex, asexual, folks as well. That's our standard. That's the science. That's medicine. Okay? That's why this class is so hard. I don't compromise on that. Because the field doesn't. We go where other people don't. We deal with stuff that other folks are scared to. The way the cat learned to swim. Well, some cats jump in the water, as us. All right? Yeah, so 4 million folks. So, I don't know about Jamie Lee Curtis's, genitalia, et cetera, any more than I know about, the South African runner who competes as a woman, and people are tripping about, oh, well, she must be a man because, and her grandma says, look, I changed her diapers. It's a girl, okay? Because she has male features and small breasts, and she outruns them. But, she's, what natives would call a two-spirit. I don't know what the Xhosa name is for them. I mean, she's South African, so she's Xhosa, Zulu, or, any number of tribal groups in South Africa. Yes?
I know
You
in,
and
in India, two spirits are called hijras.
Uh-huh.
And they're like when they reach appropriate age or something, they have a surgery and then they all live together in there's some land that they live in together. They all, their families send them away.
Yeah. And here in the United States, when that happens, because remember, 4 million births on the planet. So there's some happening here. I heard this on NPR, so it must be true. They used to, in hospital births, before they would actually notice this an extra large clitoris on a girl child or whatever. And what they said, I heard a doctor say this as part of the interview. It is easier to make a hole than a pole. So they surgically remove the extra large clitoris, almost vestigial penis, which, great, okay, cosmetically that might work, and then hand the baby over to mom and dad, wait, how do they not know? But okay, you did that, mom's under anesthesia, we're handing you the baby, and we're just making the decision to cut this thing off because it's cosmetics. Well, great, you haven't changed the genome. So what happens when onset of puberty and they get same-sex feelings, because that's what their genome is generating to generate their behavior? Yeah, easier to make a hole than a pole. Yeah, okay.
Parents have no idea that.
Right, that was in the story. Okay, that's crazy. Yes, but it happens. It has happened. Not so much now. So all the stuff about transgender, who's using what bathroom, look, we need to grow up and figure that stuff out and not trip. But we're a ways from doing that. Okay? So, yes. In Europe, these folks, 9 million women, among others, were burned as witches. Okay? Hitler put them in death camps. Homosexuals and lesbians. Yeah, we've gone through various stages of that. Here's where and it's still difficult. I got into trouble in this class because, somebody conservative from Springfield said, well, it's all in their mind, right? And so I said, no, it's not all in their mind. Or, yeah, it's sarcastic. Yeah, it's all in their mind. No. Okay, the reason we use the term sexual orientation, that comes from within the culture. They feel it's an orientation, just like magnetic compass, not a preference. No one would prefer to identify with something that everybody else says is negative. Oh, that's so gay. Faggot, lesbo, bush burner. Really. So I'm just saying, nobody prefer to be identified as something negative unless you want to take that on and say, yeah, I'm a radical fairy, so what? Or whatever. I had a question.
I was going to ask about viral load.
Yeah, let me get to that. Okay, so their identification. The reason I spent a whole bunch of time on that is because that's relatively new as a civil rights movement. Again. And it's a legitimate civil rights movement because people get killed for that and are discriminated against, right? So if they're discriminated against, that means they're going to handle those feelings using the dominant culture's mode of how do you handle difficult feelings. Okay, like Gary. He was a chicken. But he had a wife and kid by the time I saw him. So is he gay? Is he bi? He's not sure whether he got HIV positive, whether shooting drugs at Weyerhaeuser or having sex with men. Didn't matter at that point. You know, what is your identity, right? And he had HIV at a time when the only treatment was AZT. In other words, it was a death sentence. And he's 24. So how does Pendleton culture teach a 24-year-old how to deal with having a fatal disease? What's your emotional coping skill that they teach in Pendleton? Drugs, alcohol, drinking a case of Bud. What does that do to his immune system? Trashes it. And if I do the appropriate referral, send him to HIV Alliance, he's going to see people at a later stage of the disease, and that's going to freak him out. And how's he going to handle that? Drink. All right? So these are all the things that you have to think about in a biopsychosocial as they present it to you. All right. So gender identification, whose problems with, you name all the substances and processes identified by the client, have caused them to seek help with the center. Their primary routes of administration for their ingestive addictions, so ingestive simply means things that you take into your body. Okay, so those are substance abuse, alcoholism, and eating disorders, are ingestive disorders. There are process disorders like gambling, like sexual relationships, like retail therapy, like things that you do outside of your body that also affect your body and your mind as if they were a drug. And DSM has started to recognize this. So some people do both. Okay, this is why we have a public health thing, because certain environments are designed to produce addiction, like a casino. If you were to do, for example, a social recon on a casino, you'd notice, oh, wow, there's no windows and there's no clocks. Booze is cheap, food is cheap.
Pumping fresh air.
Yeah, pumping fresh air, that's it. Okay, reinforcing. Gambling and process addiction, alcoholism, and who's to say whether illegal drugs are available in the casino or not? I'm not even going to go there. Don't want to be on somebody's hit list. Yeah.
What does it mean by internal, paternal?
Enteral, parenteral, okay, are routes of administration, how drugs enter the body. So enteral is through the GI tract, gastrointestinal tract. So in other words, from your mouth to your anus, it's one continuous tube. All right? Parenteral is outside of the GI tract. So it could be smoking, it could be injection. Two. The route of administration matters because what a lot of civilians, and you ain't civilians, you're training to be pros, they don't understand that smoking white dope is the same as injecting it from the point of view of the brain and the body. If you're smoking tar heroin or methamphetamine, it's just like, if not worse, than injecting it. Because we did such a great job of scaring people away from needles, so they thought nothing is smoking tar. I mean, I had 3 people like that this last week. Okay, so enteral, parenteral, so inhaled, smoked, injected is parenteral. So their infection status is, you name whatever they're infected with. So
What would be snorting? If you're inhaling
snorting is
something
parenteral as well.
What enteral, so enteral's just like.
Enteral is anything that you eat, anything that goes into your mouth, or suppositories. I'm just saying, right? There's a reason why, okay, have you watched Shameless?
Yes.
Okay, so there's also, this is also in 1,000 Ways to Die. Okay? So, the reason you drink alcohol is because once it goes into your GI tract, alcohol is simple enough, chemically simple enough substance that it starts getting into your bloodstream slowly, right? And then it's processed by the liver. Slowly, I mean by, it's slower than doing an alcohol enema. Okay, so if you do an alcohol enema, you can basically easily overdose and die.
What's that?
An enema is basically you have this rubber bottle that goes into your anus and feeds the liquid into your anus, right? So in 1,000 Ways to Die, they showed, this guy who, was, got his, because he's an alcoholic and couldn't drink because he was on, some drug or I forgot what it was exactly, but.
Did he do it on Shameless the other night?
Yeah, he did it on Shameless with a box of wine.
Ruin it.
So is that because it's...
It's okay. It's just one section. Well, I'm just saying that's not TV. People actually do that and kill themselves.
So putting drugs up your butt, is that internal? Or
Well, that is a route of administration because they do suppositories.
But that's
Didn't mean to say that. Do suppositories. Suppositories is a route of administration for some drugs.
But it's parenteral.
It's enteral because
That's
it's
what you thought.
yeah. No, enteral is the GI tract, mouth to anus. Okay, so oral or suppositories is enteral. Parenteral is everything else. Who was first?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So like when people do that, like how much do they put up there?
Well, so here's the problem, all right?
Like how many beers?
So usually how this kills you is you have enough of the substance getting into your bloodstream nearly immediately because what the colon is designed to do is to extract water so that your feces are hard, which means it's fairly porous up there. So if you're sending liquid that is designed to cross that barrier anyway, you can basically take in a whole lot, which is why they do it, but it's enough to kill you because it'll stop your breathing. Whereas it takes time to chug-a-lug a fifth or a gallon or whatever. Right? Because you can take it in faster through an enema than you can drinking it. So there's reasons why you go kind of natural. Don't mess around with Mama Nature. Right, enteral, parenteral, yeah, yes.
Okay, so what you said he was on this other show the other night. Was he trying to? He couldn't drink, so he was trying to.
He
do it
couldn't
so-
drink. Because he had this medical condition. He really messed up. So
Oh, he had a
he
medical.
he had a medical condition. So if he tried to drink, his esophagus would cause him to cough and choke, et cetera, et
I
cetera.
thought he was trying to avoid some test or something.
Yeah. Well, if you're not familiar with
Yeah.
it, I'm not going to give it away. But I mean, what they were portraying is fairly common in our field. So that's why we got to know about this stuff.
Right.
Because people will do that in desperation. I mean, that's a sign of desperation. Definitely.
Yeah.
You? Then you. Yeah.
It's not related. I just wanted to say to go because I have doctor's appointment.
Okay. All right.
So, see,
Yeah.
I read a study about tampons not being able to be brought into treatment centers because people were hiding powders and
Yes.
soaking in alcohol. Is that another way of, can it be absorbed the same way as
It's not impossible, but that's more or less a smuggling route.
just
Yeah, it's more a smuggling route.
to use a different way?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
No,
really
we'll
gross.
basically you hide something in
you're
the
hiding it.
tampon so that it's shielded, and then you use it without the tampon. So it's a smuggling route. Okay, so yes, HIV, Hep B or C or STD positive, negative or unknown. If they're HIV positive, then ask them if they know their T cell count. and also their viral load, and if hep C, their viral load as well. So if you understand what viral load is, basically the viruses simply replicate, and they basically measure or count how many particles within a given unit of blood. I think it's 100 milligrams or something like that, 100 milliliters. Yeah. Well, yeah.
I was just gonna talk about what she was saying about the tampons and treatment centers and male treatment centers. You can't bring anything that has alcohol. As a practitioner, you have to go through and read all the ingredients of all the stuff that they bring, from toothpaste to deodorant to.
We do the same thing in the women's center. If it has alcohol in the first 3 ingredients, they're not allowed to have it.
Yeah.
Good.
We
Yeah.
had someone try to drink hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer,
Hand sanitizer.
cold medicine, yeah, right.
Hairspray.
Hairspray. People be desperate. Yeah.
There's
Not
only
not ethyl alcohol, methyl alcohol.
There's only 3 types of
Which is
hairspray
opposed.
that doesn't have any type of alcohol whatsoever.
All right, so what I've done here is basically do a study in opposites. Kram Sarah is a 85-year-old Caucasian lesbian female. All right, so that's just me backwards. All right, 59-year-old maroon heterosexual male suffering from chronic drapetomania aegypticus.
What's that?
I'll explain that with complications of rascality, workaholism, and is in remission from cannabis abuse. That's the old DSM number in high school. While type 2 diabetic, that's NIDDM, non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. He has no viral infections and has never used quote-unquote white drugs except 10 lines of cocaine in the late 70s, early 80s as part of the music industry. Drapetomania aegypticus was a term coined by one of the ancestors of the American Psychological Association, and basically the worldview of this particular mental illness is that slaves were crazy for escaping slavery. And this was the mental illness they had. It means literally the flight from home malady. Like, yeah, the plantation is your home and you running away, so you obviously mentally ill because slavery improved you. And then rascality is like when you like sass the overseer, maybe kill the overseer or burn down the barn or something, you do sabotage. So I have an attitude. I'm anti-authoritarian. You might have noticed that a little. He admits to moderate lifetime psychedelic use of less than 30 times total for LSD, mushrooms, mescaline, MDMA, and ketamine. His last use of psychedelics was '83 at a Grateful Dead show in California. Jerry was a little off. It was a sunny day in Ventura, though. Client is not in recovery. He self-reports as being CT, client. He self-reports as being at war, as you've heard that. All right, so psycho, your emotions, thoughts, beliefs, behaviors of the client. I add scripts, programs, memes. Script. Okay, I'm a Korea era vet or a Vietnam era vet. I'm a soldier. I'm a heterosexual man with a family. I've got PTSD, military, career timber industry. You have certain mindsets. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from the South. I'm from this, right? There's certain things that you know stereotypically about people from how they identify, from also what you've seen on television or what you've dealt with in terms of scripts, right? Just like it's an act or a program, if you want to think of it that way. Meme basically is a recent term, but basically means the same thing. It's a viral idea. Actually, you know, the whole biopsychosocial construct is a meme. The environmental model of public health is a meme. All right, so social. Antisocial tendencies, or their social structure, or social support systems. So, for example, if we were doing this for me, basically I have antisocial tendencies because I question society a lot. The culture I was raised in thought it was normal to question society. Question authority, and authority better be able to answer your questions. If they can't, don't trust them.
Can you go back one real quick?
Yeah. This one?
Yep.
All right.
These are all on Moodle, right?
These will be on Moodle, yes. I was actually playing around with the idea of putting these up before doing them in class, but I'm constantly upgrading, so I change them. Sometimes I don't know until just before we go on. Not entirely. I've been doing this 15 years, right? So how much variation could there be?
In
know
last
the rest
slide,
was
you
everything.
said light drugs, what does that mean?
So, all right. So that's drug slang now, okay? Because back in the day, say number 4 Asian heroin, okay? Produced in China. So opium, China white. The old China white, not the new China white, which is synthetic fentanyl. All right, so white drugs, sometimes they're white, actually white in color, but most of the time they're not, like black tar. Obviously, is a colored white.
Literally
White, yeah, they were literally white at one point, but, you know, for example, in Breaking Bad, all right? Meth is often a white powder, but it also could be brown or yellow or blue.
Or crystal.
Or crystal, like, yeah, it's like a clear, colorless crystal, but you chop it up, white powder. Right? So white drugs, basically methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin, etc. But usually those big three. And so when addicts talk about white dope, yeah, heroin, coke, meth, and you just clarify what it is. Because it might not be white. Black tar ain't. Some methane. Coke, you definitely don't want to do any coke that isn't white.
They have like cars that are, you can order cars that are cocaine white.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
awful.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, clients will teach you this stuff, right? So, and then you have drug slang, which changes regionally, like parachutes. Back in the day, a parachute was a combination of methamphetamine and heroin, as opposed to a speedball, which is cocaine and heroin. Right? So the idea, the meme, if you will, stimulants and heroin. The heroin cuts the edge of the stimulant cuts the down of the heroin. Yeah.
That's fine. I know, like, parachuting is like when you take like whatever substance and like put it in tissue paper and swallow it.
Yeah.
So there's
Okay.
different-
Right.
there's
So
different-
it's morphed. So, you know, there are websites where you can actually look up drug slang. I mean, it's entertaining, but it changes. And it morphs. So, you know, you could study and stay ahead of it, or just tell me what you mean by that. Just take a risk. Oh, well, you're kind of not with it. No, just where I'm from, parachuting means this, or whatever. But everybody knows what a speedball is, especially if you knew Jerry Garcia. All right, so use this email for all class communications, questions, turning in assignments. Moodle will allow you to message me.
You don't want hard copies of our thing.
I like hard copies. I print out everything anyway. I mean, if you do hard copies, that's fine. Of course. I'm old school.
But it's okay to just
So-
send it.
It's all okay to send it.
Okay.
My preference, yeah, and so the other part,
Hundreds of-
so you can use Moodle to download class materials and upload assignments if you want to do that, but my preference is to use Moodle for assignments, but email is a primary source for assignments. In other words, send me it by email because I don't like the formatting that Moodle does when you upload an assignment to Moodle. It changes it.
Funny.
Yeah,
Squishes it together.
waste paper.
So, with this, bio, where are we supposed to get our person from?
You can make one up.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, how?
You can use a real, okay, so a composite person. Gary isn't his real name, but he was a real person. And I used it to illustrate, look, yeah, how does Pendleton culture, is he gay? He had a wife and kids. So understand, gay people can have wives in heterosexual marriages. They can, right? But she didn't allow him to see the kids after he became positive, so he's coming to Lane Community College to get trained as a pilot with less than 2 years to live.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not going to talk him out of that. My job is to make sure he stays in recovery and extends his life. Right? So part of the piece then is understanding, what the client is bringing to you and how you can get them on a path to progression, no matter how hopeless it looks.
So we're supposed to write that in there too, how we get them on the path?
Yes. What your solution is, and the solution is going to be from the client's point of view. So look, if they're using, the goal is to get them to not use. And to to get them to not use and to give them a realistic expectation of what that will look like. Okay, so what DSM, and this is what I tell clients, okay?
Yeah.
Like, okay, pick a drug. Meth, okay.
Oh, so it's just.
Yeah. Okay, so meth. So here's what we know about meth. Meth is like doing brain cancer. Pretty much. Right? So you don't even, listen, you need to be clean for at least 3 continuous years to recover as much as you're going to from meth. Because it's like brain cancer, it's like, think of it like traumatic brain injury. Okay? Like, before the war, 75% of TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, were caused by people under the influence leaving the vehicle through the windshield. Being in a coma, learning to pee and walk and all that kind of stuff. And when that happens, because you have brain damage, you're not going to come back to the way you were before the accident. You're going to improve to a certain level, and then that's the new normal. Okay? So with meth, it depends on how old you are, the neuroplasticity, i.e., how much your brain is going to come back. Don't necessarily expect to come back to the way you were before you started using, particularly if you started using 15 years ago. Or 20. Okay? It's as damaging, as alcoholism. Here's an irony. If you're a heroin addict, you're physically doing less damage than an alcoholic. You can put them side by side, and the junkie looks healthier than the alcoholic. If they're getting clean stuff, relatively consistent supply, et cetera, it's less damaging than alcohol. Physiologically. That's why the bio part. What is the drug doing to their body? All right? So, and we'll go over that so you'll be able to complete this. So yeah, like drug like meth. So give them a realistic expectation. Look, you ain't even seriously in remission according to DSM until you quit for a year. And the goal is a minimum of 3 years. We don't even allow drug counselors to train till they've had a minimum of 3 years clean and sober, and then we put them through a 2-year program so that by the time they're certified, they got 5 years continuous. Right? If they're in recovery. So I'm just saying, just understand what that's realism. You know, if it's pot, again, you know, the Harris rule of thumb. You don't think you have a problem? Great. Stop smoking for 3 to 6 months. And if at the end of 6 months you don't care that you haven't been smoking for 6 months, then you probably don't have a problem. But get to 6 months. Minimum detox for pot is a month. So don't even be proud that you stopped for 3 weeks. I mean, no, it's like, let's get serious till you pee clean. And I've seen people take 6 months to pee clean, actually not using. So again, you know, minimum for all drugs is a year. Certain drugs that are real toxic, like meth, 3 years. You want to work in the field? 5 years. Okay, you can have prescription Valium, but I mean, you're a patient, not an addict. Right? So, I mean, giving people realistic expectations. Now, if they just use today, getting to a month, hey, getting to a week is difficult. So in your biopsychosocial, depending on who, just telling them that and getting a period of sobriety in, and look, relapse is going to happen because their brain has changed from their use, so it's going to be difficult. Because remember what I said the other day about, you know, the brain's response to recovery is boredom. And you're Americans. How do Americans handle boredom?
Not very well.
Not very well. Right? So we have to get them through. That's why, you know, meditation, exercise, et cetera, et cetera. We're changing your brain chemistry back to a normal by having you rely on your own chemicals. Who's that over there?
Could you do this paper on yourself?
Huh?
Could you do this paper on yourself?
Change your name. Yes, you can. It has been done. Yes.
Can you use someone who has been through the recovery and has many years clean already and say what you did to help that person, like their treatment
Yes,
plan?
but also, okay, so we can also then talk about if you're going to do that, then look at what their issues are in long-term recovery. Okay, so long-term recovery is like anywhere from like 5 years to a decade. Let's say a decade. Okay, so at that level, what's happening, you're not fighting your addiction. Addiction or using is so down on the list, so far down on the list, it's not even on the list anymore. But you've got other things, like trying to be a nice person instead of an a-hole. Right? So you got other recovery issues going on. All right, so yes, okay to turn things into the office or in class or the counseling office. Okay, anything on a test will be in a PowerPoint or on Moodle in your reading. So anything I present here is like a hypercube, you can unfold it. So I have academic freedom. I'll give you the science as far as it goes. I'll give you data as far as it exists, because it doesn't always. I clearly state my opinions, and those opinions will be based on multiple examples and sources, but I'll let you know when it's my opinion, like the intersex thing. Now, to the degree that I'm a Christian, that actually squares with my Christian beliefs. Everybody here is a child of God, so it's my duty to serve you. End of discussion. But not everybody's like that. Okay? So I will act to diffuse toxic memes, myths, etc. So, for example, let's say that treatment is a box. It has to occur within a defined and limited mindset, in a clinical setting. It's medical in orientation. It's moneyed, either you paying or somebody paying, because it's expensive. Educated beyond a certain level. Compensated, professionals are compensated, and time limited. Now here's the irony, all right? So the whole 28-day model for treatment, you know where that came from? The military. You had 1 day to go from base to treatment, and 1 day to get back. Chop that at both ends, you got 28 days. Don't ask me what happens in February. That's where that was. Then that's why insurance was paying for 28 days of treatment. That's where that number came from. Now, does that make sense? Does that make medical sense? No. But that's what we're working with.
Isn't that now, since it's become medical, isn't that varied by?
It will depend on what your policy says. Okay?
I know that there's a treatment center here in Eugene that is now giving out 60, 90, 120 days.
There are long-term residential programs like Willamette Family, which, because they're getting sourced money from the government for people who are on paper, i.e. mandated to treatment, right? So they know that 28-day model ain't gonna work for them, so they'll pay for 60 or 90 or 180-day treatment. So anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on
The situation, or if you have
Yeah.
kids.
right, or if you have kids, right? Okay, but again, we've only had women's treatment for less than 40 years, so which I thought was always crazy too, but hey. So recovering can occur outside that defined and limited mindset and clinical setting, and also treatment can also be limited in cultural scope and sequence, and we've basically been trying to change that too, to say, look, the people that are coming to you are coming from a particular culture that might be outside of your comfort zone or your mindset. Doesn't matter. We don't discriminate because of that. We take that into consideration as part of the treatment. So medical means the patient must be compliant and obey the treatment practitioners. Yeah. Moneyed means that somebody has to pay for the treatment, either insurance or the state. Educated means a certain degree of scientific literacy, which requires first literacy, numeracy, understanding the numbers, and a comfort with learning when you don't know something. So that first point about the patient must be compliant and obey the treatment practitioners. Sometimes compliance is not about what the patient is doing, it's whether the practitioner is comfortable with you and what you raise as an issue. Yes?
What's an example? Like, what's something that?
I'm glad you asked.
I could give you 100.
Okay. I have taken issue, well, here, so, this is a real world example, real world treatments, so I don't actually have to make up clients, they come to me, right? So this state was founded to exclude black people. Well, black people are here anyway, right? Sometimes people of different races, still human, mix. What happens with the kids? Well, here's what happened with this particular student. She was a biracial woman. Her white mom remarried to a white stepdad who sexually and physically abused her. Called her nigger bitch. She drank to deal with that. Right? So, I ran into her in my ethnic studies class and said, okay, there's actually positive values around that, but listen, you can't come to school sloshed. And you're old enough, I need to send you to treatment. Got her there. So, in the science, we know that people self-medicate. So we have to, all right, she's a woman. She's been sexually abused. Boom. We know that she's going to self-medicate. She's a woman of color who has experienced racism and has used alcohol to self-medicate from that. Should she bring those issues up in treatment?
Yes.
Yeah.
The treatment agency didn't think so. Because of their 12-step orientation. Now, it's ironic because Bill W. was not a racist. Bill W. actually brought black folks from uptown in Harlem to a meeting in Midtown Manhattan, and the all-white folks didn't want the black people sitting in on an AA meeting. And this Bill W., the founder of AA, bringing them. So he had a vote. Well, do you believe that black people should get Yeah. Okay. Well, they should have their own meeting. Well, do you mind if they sit in to see how it's done? Okay, we'll let that happen. Really? Okay, so in treatment, this woman was told that she was defocusing from her recovery by raising race as an issue in the group. And kicked out in 3 weeks in a long-term residential program, along with 4 other black women, none of which lasted more than 6 weeks. I had an intern inside of the time that basically said she is experiencing racial harassment within that agency. Okay, so.
This is recent?
It's in the mid-aughts, yes. Okay, so part of the piece then is looking at, all right, the science says we need to deal with that and address her issues, whether or not you feel comfortable with it. Because should I have sent her to the Black Woman 12-Step Agency in Portland? No. But it existed at the time.
Did she get the help she needed?
She OD'd.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so.
So should you have sent her to the black?
Yeah, I know. I can't second guess myself too much. Okay, it's part of what happens in the field. We deal with death.
Watch work, huh?
Yeah,
It's like the
right.
SARS program.
Yeah.
They do the SARS program. They don't allow the girls to speak about their
Right, right. So we will continue this Thursday.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.